It is May 10th, 1775. War has broke out with the colonies against Great Britain. Lexington and Concord has already happened. And the rebels, as some would say, have started a siege on Boston that's held by the British. Well, there's a couple of men who know the strategic importance of, let's just say, a certain fort and where it lies that will help them with their struggle, as you'd say. That is the traitorous Benedict Arnold and Ethan Allen of New Hampshire Grants. And Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys, along with Benedict Arnold, they will come up to the Champlain Valley and assault a fort that would be the key to the continent and the key to make sure that Britain can attack Boston and everybody else on the northeast coast from the Champlain Valley. And that fort they attacked on May 10th is none other than Fort Ticonderoga, which is where we are at. Now, for brief history on Fort Ticonderoga. Fort Ticonderoga was not a British fort, at least not originally. Fort Ticonderoga was built during the 7 Years' War, or as us Americans know, the French and Indian War. And it was built by the French, who knew the importance as well of the Champlain Valley, because they wanted to make sure that they could attack Fort William Henry that was also being built down in Lake George. Because why? Waterways were the highways back in the day. So what happened was that the British at the time knew a fort was being built, made of stone. And it would be ran by and in charge of by Montcalm, who we know eventually will be killed at the Plains of Abraham battle in Quebec. And that is given a French name, this fort. This fort is called Fort Carillon. And Fort Carillon stays in service for the French for a few years. It's a stone fort with a lot more integrity than a wooden fort would, like Fort William Henry. And it sustains 4 attacks throughout its time, and it is a 50-50 chances of winning. It's batting 500. That's what it is. And it's mainly the fault of its losses due to poor command. Yeah, poor command would probably be the best one. And resources as well. But back to May 10th. Benedict Arnold, Ethan Allen, and the Green Mountain Boys come up. They will surprise not many British occupiers that are left here at the fort, and they easily take it over. And now they have won it and everything. And I have here Fort Ticonderoga, A Key to a Continent by Edward P. Hamilton for my resource. So we're going to get into that in a second. Now, May 10th, 1775, Fort Ticonderoga wasn't as cared for within the 20 years that it's been around. It's fallen to a bit of disrepair, but it still has strategic importance because if you could see, this is the south end of Lake Champlain, right near the end. And behind me is Mount Defiance. And then just over my shoulder here is Mountain Independence. And right here is also the Chute River, which connects to Lake George. Well, Lake George feeds into it. So it falls out of disrepair. It's not as important because it was during the peacetime. In those 20 years, no one really thought to look after Fort Ticonderoga after the French and Indian War, 7 Years' War. You could see some of the damage is still hasn't been fixed yet, like right here. And the Fort Ticonderoga, the people who run it have done a really great job of bringing this fort back to life for people to be able to understand its history. Now, we're going to get into Fort Ticonderoga, A Key to a Continent by Edward P. Hamilton. It was just turning light as the men, marching in column, 3 abreast, approached the fort. The provincials passed by the great well and up the slope to the base of the east curtain wall. A small portal and a tunnel here penetrated into the basement of the eastern barrack building, then up a flight of stone steps onto the parade ground. A sentry posted at the entrance snapped his firelock at the leader of the intruders, but the gun misfired, and the sentry turned and fled into the shelter of a bomb-proof on the north side of the parade ground. The Green Mountain Boys poured up the steps and then on up onto the walls and into the barracks, startling the garrison from a sound sleep, overpowering them with ease in their beds, and at once starting their search for plunder. Allen, Arnold, and a few others stormed across the courtyard, where they were accosted by a second sentry, who pricked one of the boys with his bayonet, and then was struck down by the flat of Ethan's sword. Allen demanded to be shown the commander's quarters, and the cowed sentry pointed out a stairway which led up to the second story of the western barrack. The Vermonter dashed up the steps, closely followed by Arnold. "Come out, you old rat!" roared Ethan, mad with excitement. Almost at once, the figure of a British officer appeared at the top of the stairs, fully dressed except for the breeches held in his hands. This was Lieutenant Felton, Captain Delaplace's only officer. The assailants paused for a moment as Felton talked and tried to stall, hoping that the garrison would come to his aid, but they were already overpowered. Allen became impatient, breathed threats of no quarter, threatened Felton with his sword, shouted that he had orders from the state of Connecticut to take the fort, and that he exercised a joint command with Benedict Arnold, who has similar orders from Massachusetts. Arnold seems to have remained calmer and attempted to restrain Allen's violence with some success, but the situation was tense. Vermonters in the courtyard were threatening Felton with their fowling pieces. Then Delaplace, fully dressed at last, appeared in the doorway at the head of the stairs. He asked under what authority the leaders were acting. Allen, now somewhat calmer, cried, "In the name of the great Jehovah and the Continental Congress." There was nothing that Delaplace could do but surrender, and so the old stone fortress passed into the hands of the Green Mountain Boys without bloodshed. And that's how the Green Mountain Boys with Ethan Allen and Benedict Arnold took over the fort. It was that simple because they got him in the middle of the night and they were already overpowered. And the fort will be held for a couple more years before its abandonment when John Burgoyne comes down Lake Champlain for the Saratoga campaign. But those who are stationed here face tough winters, and they still stick it out until then. And that's the story of Fort Ticonderoga's capture. And now we get to celebrate its 250th. So you guys have a good one. Please like, subscribe, and share. I'll see you in the next video.